Welcome CSC200 class. I'm going to call this exercise 3B because I'm actually going to revisit exercise 3, and it's just for a couple simple things I want to go over. And one of the things is that after looking at the video that I recorded last year of the pitchers and players, if you do some more research on relational databases, you'll find that the pitchers and players tables that we set up aren't really indicative of a true relational databases for a number of reasons. It's more like a subset. Our pitchers was more like a subset that we created here. And, and that's fine. We kind of learned about the child-parent relationship and if we deleted them. But we'll go over more of a true relational database. And even some of the things we're dealing with, we could do this in Excel. These aren't big enough to really be warranting a database. But one thing I do want to point out, one kind of negative thing about the way that we did it in the first place, I want to point out here, is we just created an ID that this was our foreign key ID, which is fine because we want that. And that links back to our original table of players or the parent table. So if we go back to here's Eddie Solomon. If I go here, if I click on here, you'll see the original. There it is, Eddie Solomon. He's ID 26, and that's fine. And I'll go back to my pictures here. What we really want here is a table that will show different information. That'll be a different list of information. We just have first and last name and ID in here, and every table should have its own unique ID. This does not. This is using the foreign key ID, which is fine. But what we're going to do is just go through this again and show more of a proper way to set up a relational database. Again, even just from this example, just to show it the right way and a couple things we could do with it, such as creating joins and exporting and stuff like that. So, and let me just point out that one reason why this isn't a good thing, if I go to players table and I go down the list here and number 26, Eddie Solomon. Now he was a pitcher from 1982. He sometimes went by the name Buddy. So if I would edit Eddie Solomon and suddenly we're going to put him on the roster as Buddy, and I'll save this. I'll just hit go. What would happen then if I go back to pitchers is that would not update. He would still be Eddie Solomon here. And if I click on his ID, it would be Buddy Solomon. So that's kind of a loss of integrity. We have kind of a conflict there. So the fact that we copied the first and last name from the first table and without any ability to kind of cross-reference it or to make sure that they both change without doing it manually is a little bit of a problem. So that's why you typically won't copy information from one database to the other. You'd usually join it in a query if you need to use it. So let me go through doing that quickly. And what I'll do is I'll just create a brand new database. So I'll go into my original database and create a table, and I'll just call it Pitchers2. Here I have one here. So you can do that too. Just call it Pitchers2. We'll know that that's different from the original Pitchers. And I'm going to put in just a couple columns here. I'll put in 5. I'll put in 5 columns. And what I'll do here is I'll create, basically this one should be the primary ID of this table. Even though there will be a foreign key to its player ID, I'm going to call it pitcher ID. I'll give it its own unique name, and that's coming up there. And I'll just put 11 again because that's what we've been using. And we're going to use auto increment. And I'm going to make sure that it's the primary in our table, in this particular table. And then also what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put player ID. Now I could just call it ID because that's what it was called in players, but I'll call it player ID. And I'll also put 11 here. And all that I have to do here is put index, because we're going to make this a foreign key, but I'll just put index, so it's indexed right now. And as far as anything else here, I'm just going to put some things like IP for innings pitched, wins and losses. We're not even going to use these right now, but this is what the kind of thing we would have in this table anyway. We would have all the pitching stats, not the hitting stats, which is showing up in players. We would have all the pitchings, wins and losses and games and saves and ERA and all that kind of stuff, strikeouts per 9 innings and all that kind of stuff. But I'll just put 3 things for now, just to create this kind of mini table that we're working on. And we're going to need integers here, so I'll just put innings pitch. I'll just put 3 digits for all these things. We wouldn't need any more than that, unless it was career stats. Somebody might have 1,000 innings over their career, something like that. So I'll hit go now because I think we're okay. So I'll save this. Actually, I'll hit save down here and save our new table as Pitchers2. And then when we look at it, if we take a look at Pitchers2, whether we click here or here, you'll see that there's nothing in it yet because we didn't populate it yet with anything. And we could do that next. And remember, we did the insert into. But before I do that, I want to go to my structure. And what I want to do here is go to relation view. And I'm going to go in here and choose a foreign key for player ID. And you can see it's going into Pitchers, Players ID. It's showing one initially, but I'm going to go here and choose for the foreign key, I want to choose Players ID. Because this is the one that's actually going to be linked to the players table. So make sure that's Players ID. So the player ID has a foreign key that's linking it. So this is the child and this is going to be the parent. The foreign key is linking to the parent. And that's all we need to do right now. Don't worry about this stuff right now. So let me save this right now. What I'll also do is go back to the players table. And one thing I want to do here, and it may already be done, is I want to go to Structure. And this is the parent table. And I'm going to go down to Relation View. And this may already be here. And originally like this, but I chose last. And what that does is it'll show the last name when you hover over the ID, because when we have our new table, we won't see names in there. We're not going to put names in there. So we're going to need to see the last name. So we're going to do that, and you'll see what I mean. And I'll save that. Now, our next part is, we've done this before, is going back to Pitchers and populating it. And if you remember how we did that, we went to SQL, and we went to W3 to go find our code so we don't have to memorize. We used a insert into select, which is the one that copies data from one table and inserts it into the other. Now we're not going to copy names. We're just going to take the foreign key ID. That's really all that we really need to copy into here. So I could scroll down and find that one. There's one there with Germany, because we do want to find all the players that are pitchers. We do want to put them in there, but we're not going to put their names or anything. So I'll copy this and I'll go back and I'll paste this. And again, instead of into customers, this is going to be pitchers too. And I'll just copy that so I can maybe use it again. And all that we're going to have in here, we don't even need pitcher ID. We only need player ID. So I'll just put that in there. Whether you type it in or when you double click, it puts those little kind of tilde looking things, those little accents in there. And that's fine. You could leave that in there. That's all we need in there right now, because that's all we're inserting in from the players table. So let me put players here. Well, actually, it's from players here. And the only thing we need from here is going to be ID. That's coming from the players one. So it's ID from players, and that's the only thing we're going to need. And it's not going to be country Germany. It's going to be position equals P, because we used pitchers for that. So we're going to get all the pitchers from the players table, and we're going to take their ID and put it in there. So that's all we're putting in. And I'm going to hit go. So remember, this was the insert into select. So I'll hit go. And it says 11 rows. So I'll browse and see what I have. It won't be that exciting because I won't see any names in there, but I will see by their player ID, I could hover over them and see Romo and see Robinson and Roden. And also there's Solomon. And again, now when I click on this, no matter what changes, this is a link back to the parent database. So when I click on here, I don't have to worry about changing something. It'll say this one should say Buddy Solomon. Now it's showing its batting information, which I don't need right now. But you know, in reality, that would probably link back to his personal information, you know, his height and weight and all that kind of stuff that you might see as kind of more of the parent area of the database, as opposed to his batting stats. There may be a database that has all their personal information. Then there's their stats. Then there's pitching stats and things like that, as far as, you know, if you look at a database for an organization like that. So this is actually the way it should be set up. Now, you might look at it and say, well, that's hard to read because there's no names in there. You know, yeah, you can't hover over those. But remember, if we would pull this from a database into a website and display it, we'd be able to pull what we want by doing something called a join. So we can actually join the names from another table, which we're going to do. You could also generate this stuff into an Excel spreadsheet, which I'll show in a minute. But let me do a join first. So I'm going to go to, just so it looks nice, I'm going to go to W3 Schools and look for join. And I'll just use the first one that has joins. And I'll scroll down and just find the first example here and just copy it. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here, but we're not going to need that much when we do it. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to do an SQL, and I'll paste this in here and just update it a little bit. And for what I want here is from the from part, I'm going to put players, And the inner join here is going to be my pitchers2, because that's what I'm going to join it into. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say where the pitchers, let me highlight just this bottom part. This will be where the player's ID is equivalent or equal to the pitcher's player ID. So this is the link. That's why we're putting this in here. This is the commonality here. This is the join. And we're saying, okay, all those players that share that same thing, we're going to join them together. And that's how we can pull other information. So what we're going to put in here, you can put in the player ID or the ID, whichever one. Like if you were going to put in, just for example, if you just wanted to see the players.id, the original ID, you could just put players.id. Or you could put in the pitchers2.player.id. Either one you want to display is fine. And then I'm also going to display the pitchers2 dot, double click on this to the pitcher ID. Can I put that in there? Yeah, that'll work. I'll take this out of here since I'm using the dot. And then I would have to put a comma to separate them. So I'm selecting the player's ID, pitcher's ID, and then what I'm also going to put in there, these are all going to be players. I'm going to say players, comma, or players dot last, because if I want their last name, and then a comma, and then players dot first, if I want their first name. And even if I want to put position in there, that's even though I know they're pitchers, but I could, just to try this out, I'll just put players dot POS. I guess that's how we have position in there. And then anything else can be like pitchers 2 dot, and I think we had innings pitched, we had wins, and we had losses. Now what I'll do is I'll just copy this since I have a problem typing it and put a dot in between. So this is everything that should display. Player's ID, pitcher ID, player's last name, player's position. I need a comma here. Pitchers 2, innings pitched, wins and losses. So I have all that information that's over here, plus the names, plus the player's ID. I'm just not using pitcher ID, or I'm not using player ID. I'm going to use their original player's ID here. And I'm getting from players and joining on pitchers 2. And for the on part, this is the commonality between the two. And I'm going to copy it just in case we have a problem here. And what I'll also do, I'll say retain query box. That way you can see the query when we hit go and it doesn't kind of open a new screen. You don't have to hit back or anything like that. So I'll do that and I'll hit go and see if this worked. And you might say, where it is. You might say, where is it? Well, if you scroll down, oh, unknown field. Pitchers 2 in the field list. Must have screwed something in there. We have players ID, pitchers. Oh, there's not a period in here, so that's what got messed up. It's hard to see that stuff. So pitchers2.w and then a comma and then pitchers2.l. So that's okay that comes up. You might have similar errors. It's just syntax kind of stuff in here. And I'll try it again, and I'll make sure retain query box is still there, and I'll hit go. And I have another one, players ID, pitchers2.players ID. And that's because it's player ID. See another syntax error there. So I'll fix that, and I'll hit go again. This should work this time. No error, and I'll scroll down here, and this is my kind of my finished output. This is a join. So I'm joining. I have ID, their original ID. I have their pitcher ID, which is the primary for the pitchers, and I also have now that I have their last names, first names, and I have all their stats. So that's a way I could kind of join some of the information from another table into this one. And this is kind of the finished product, the way you'd want to display that. Now you could do that on a web page if we've been working with web pages and displaying things on a web page. Not only can you do that, you can also export this. So if you did a query, and this is kind of the way it works in in organizations, schools, and businesses. There may be information on the database, but people are going to want that stuff not in a database file, but they'll want that as an Excel file so they could work with some things, whether it's sales figures or whatever it is, or it could be information about students and grades and stuff like that. So what you could do is you could export this, and export it as a CSV file, comma separated values file, and I'll hit export here. And this is from the query. This is going from the query, so I'm going to export. And one thing it says here is, well, you got to choose the format. I'm going to choose CSV. I don't think they have just straight Excel. Well, actually, they have CSV for MS Excel. I haven't tried that one yet, so I'll check it out. I've just used a straight CSV, but since that's the option that we're going to do. Now, instead of just hitting go, one thing I want to hit custom here. Not that there's a whole lot of things on custom, but we do want to make sure that it says put columns names. I don't know why it says columns names, but put columns names in the first row. So we want to make, otherwise they won't show the column names. We won't see the headings like we normally do. We won't see the innings pitched and stuff like that. It says Excel Edition Windows. I guess I'll just leave that. It shouldn't have a problem with that. But that's all I need from there. And you shouldn't have to worry about anything else. So I'm gonna hit go. And it should download the file. Now I've tried this a couple times and did a couple different things. Now it's still saying players, even though because we're doing a join from players, but we could certainly change that. And I'm going to double click on it and see what it looks like in Excel. And that's not necessarily what I want, because that doesn't look good. So whatever format I use for that one doesn't work. So I'm going to go back and try that again. And I'm just going to go back to the quick method, and I'm just going to select CSV. I did this last time, and it worked fine with CSV. I just had to go to custom, and then put columns names in first row. And I'll try that this time and see if it works better. We'll open this one up, and that looks like what we want. So for some reason maybe because I'm on a Mac, I'm doing this on a Mac, that it screwed that up. I wouldn't think that it would be a problem, but this is what we want here. And notice these are the column names that are showing up here. That way, if I wanted to format it as an Excel spreadsheet and I wanted to, I want to make it look nice or make a chart, I wouldn't make a chart from this kind of stuff unless I had a couple things where I'd want to show their wins and losses and stuff like that to show who are the top pitchers or who are the top strikeouts or something like that. But that's just a couple things I wanted to show. This is a little addendum exercise. And again, just wanted to show a little more kind of better structural way that foreign keys should be set up and that relational databases will be set up. We'll be doing more with this as we go on, but I wanted to show that before we got too far away from the pitchers thing, in case you were like, wait a minute, what happens if we change the name and the name changes? So now that won't happen because we have our only link to that file is a player ID, which is the way it should be, and that's the way you'll see products and things like that in customer databases and organization databases. So that's, I guess I'll call that EX3B, even though it'll be kind of after 5 or whatever we're working on right now. But just wanted to go over that, and we'll do more with relational databases as we go on.